Imagine being like 17 years old.
Uh,
You're sitting in a massive, brightly lit university lecture hall.
right.
And it is the very first time in your entire life that you have ever set foot inside a classroom. You're surrounded by hundreds of other students who just seem to effortlessly understand the invisible rules of this environment.
They know exactly how to take notes, when to listen, how to just exist in that space.
Exactly. So the professor projects a historical image on the screen, and you raise your hand to ask a question. And the moment the words leave your mouth, the entire room drops into this stunned, horrified silence.
Oh, wow.
Because the question you just asked out loud in a university history class is, what is the Holocaust?
It's the kind of silence that has an immediate, physical weight to it. A suffocating silence where you realize you've crossed a boundary you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
You've just revealed a gap in your knowledge so profound that the people around you genuinely believe you must be making some sort of cruel, calculated joke.
Right, because you aren't just missing a historical fact. You are entirely disconnected from the shared grief and history of the modern world.
It's just chillin'.
It really is. Well, welcome to the Book Nook. We are so thrilled to have you here with us for this deep dive.
Absolutely. We love doing this.
Today, we're immersing ourselves in Tara Westover's absolutely breathtaking memoir, Educated. At its foundation, this is the story of that exact girl in the lecture hall.
A girl who escaped a radical survivalist family living in the remote mountains of Idaho, and against all odds, navigated her way to a PhD from Cambridge University.
The trajectory is just staggering. I mean, we're talking about someone who, for a significant portion of her childhood, didn't even possess a birth certificate.
Yeah, the state, the government, the medical establishment, none of them officially knew she existed.
Which is wild to think about, to go from that level of total erasure to walking the halls of Cambridge and Harvard. It requires a psychological metamorphosis that is incredibly fraught.
And deeply painful.
So, that metamorphosis is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We aren't here to just list the shocking details of Tara's upbringing, like a table of contents.
Right. We really want to pull apart the underlying mechanics of her world.
Exactly. We're going to explore the profound philosophical questions this book raises about the malleability of memory, the fragility of reality, and the devastating gravity of family loyalty.
Because the education we're talking about today isn't just accumulating data points or historical dates. It is the conscious, agonizing construction of an independent self.
I love how you phrase that. Let's start by establishing the physical geography of Tara's childhood. We need to travel to the base of Buck's Peak in rural Idaho.
Buck's Peak. It's so central to everything.
It really is. The mountain isn't just a backdrop. It operates as an active, looming character in her life. The family lives in near total isolation there.
And there's that specific rock formation, right? The Indian princess.
Yes. Her father points it out to the kids, showing them how her shape emerges from the stone every single spring as the snow melts. He says she's supposedly watching the buffalo return to the valley.
It's almost mythological.
Totally. And for Tara, the mountain dictates the rhythm of reality. Without school calendars or, standard work weeks, everything operates on the cyclical rhythm of the seasons and the land.
That physical isolation is absolutely crucial to understand. It provides the literal infrastructure for the psychological isolation the father enforces.
Because when you remove a family from the grid of society, whoever controls the immediate environment basically controls reality itself.
Exactly. The father is the ultimate, undisputed gatekeeper of truth. His worldview is completely saturated in extreme survivalism and fundamentalist paranoia.
Which was highly characteristic of certain fringe movements in the 1990s.
Yeah. He believes, with absolute conviction, in the impending days of abomination, like a fast-approaching apocalyptic collapse of society.
Right. And within that framework, the medical establishment, public schools, the federal government, they aren't just flawed institutions to him.
No, they are literal agents of the Illuminati actively working to enslave humanity.
It's terrifying. And his authority within that framework is absolute, but more dangerously, it's wildly erratic. There's this one moment that perfectly illustrates this.
The honey story.
The honey story. So the family is gathered in their living room, and the father is reading aloud from the book of Isaiah.
Okay.
He's reading a biblical prophecy about Emmanuel, and he hits a very specific line. It goes something like, "Butter and honey shall he eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose the good."
Right, a fairly standard verse.
But according to Tara, he reads this line over and over. His voice climbs higher, his eyes widen. In that exact moment, he decides he's just received a divine, irrefutable doctrine directly from the Lord.
And the mechanism of what happens next is what we really need to look at. The consequence isn't just like quiet spiritual reflection.
No, it's massive disruptive action. The very next morning, he purges their entire refrigerator of every dairy product. Milk, yogurt, cheese, and it all goes in the trash.
Just completely gone.
Yeah. Then he drives his truck into town and comes back with the bed loaded with 50 gallons of honey. He hauls these massive tubs into the basement.
50 gallons! That is unbelievable.
I know, and he even tries to preach this sudden anti-milk doctrine to the other farmers in their community. He literally corners his own cousin who runs a dairy farm, telling him his livelihood is an affront to God.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. If you grow up inside an ecosystem where there is only one source of truth.
Like a terrarium.
Yes, exactly like a glass terrarium, completely sealed off from the outside world. How can you possibly know what the actual sky looks like?
You can't. You look up, you see the condensation on the glass lid, and the only authority figure in your universe points to the glass and says, that is the sky.
And you have zero comparative data to doubt it. For young Tara, Buck's Peak was the absolute impenetrable boundary of her reality.
So when you're trapped inside that terrarium, external events are only allowed inside once they've been filtered through the father's paranoia.
Which brings us to the siege at Ruby Ridge. It operated as this defining, catastrophic anchor for the family's psychology.
The story of the Weaver family. So Tara's father gathers the kids around their kitchen table and tells them about this family of, quote-unquote, freedom fighters living in a cabin nearby.
And the narrative he feeds them is utterly terrifying.
It is. He tells them federal agents surrounded the Weaver cabin for one singular reason, because the family refused to let the government brainwash their children in the public school system.
He vividly describes the feds shooting a hungry little boy in the back and then shooting the mother straight through the head while she was holding her baby.
The terror this instills in the Westover children is visceral. They don't just sit and listen. They immediately start packing these head-for-the-hills bags stuffed with MREs and water purifiers.
They even bury a military surplus rifle wrapped in black plastic and duct tape near an abandoned railway car.
Yeah, and they spend days in the sweltering heat canning hundreds of jars of peaches solely to survive the federal siege they now believe is coming for them next.
Now, we need to step out of the narrative for a second here to establish the historical context, and we want to be completely clear. We are just neutrally recounting how Tara later uncovers the objective facts of this event as presented in her book without taking any political sides whatsoever.
Absolutely, just looking at the historical record she found.
Right. Years later at university, Tara gains access to the internet. She looks up the actual documented facts of the 1992 Ruby Ridge standoff.
She reads the news reports, the Senate subcommittee hearings, all of it.
And she discovers that the conflict did not begin because of homeschooling. The standoff was initiated because Randy Weaver had attended an Aryan Nations gathering associated with white supremacists and sold illegal modified shotguns to an undercover ATF agent.
And then he failed to appear in court on those federal weapons charges.
Exactly. So the entire foundational myth of her childhood fear that the government comes to murder families who simply want to homeschool their kids was a complete fabrication.
He was entirely disconnected from reality.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of the father's narrative control. He took a complex, tragic federal standoff and actively weaponized it.
By stripping away the context of illegal firearms, he justified his own extreme choices. He convinced his kids their lives depended on staying uneducated and trusting only him.
He essentially used the Weaver family's tragedy as the mortar to build the walls of their terrarium even thicker.
Wow. But if the father is the one building this terrifying glass box, we have to ask, how did the mother, Faye, ever allow herself to be locked inside it?
Right, because Faye grew up completely outside that box.
The contrast is unbelievable. She grew up as a mailman's daughter in a very respectable, proper town setting. Her own mother was a meticulous seamstress who obsessed over social propriety.
She was the kind of woman who would agonize over whether to wear cream shoes versus white shoes to a church function.
Right. So Faye grew up immersed in this world of intense social order and polite rules.
Yet when we meet her as an adult, she's undergone this total psychological transformation. She seems to have rebelled against that pristine upbringing by marrying the most severe survivalist she could find.
And in the process, she becomes an incredibly submissive wife. She constantly defers to her husband, constantly apologizes for her own presence.
She basically surrenders her voice to his authority. until the father developed a new scheme for absolute self-reliance.
Ah, yes. He decides that relying on hospitals is bowing to the Illuminati, so they must subvert the medical establishment entirely.
He pushes his deeply insecure wife into becoming an unlicensed midwife, and she is absolutely terrified.
The book describes the aftermath of her very first solo birth. She comes back to the house so pale her skin looks translucent. She collapses onto the couch, physically trembling.
It was highly traumatic. She describes how the mother tore severely and was hemorrhaging, and the baby was born purple, limp, with the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck.
She literally begs her husband to let her quit, but he refuses, insisting it's a direct calling from the Lord.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, pushing her into midwifery accidentally creates a massive shift in the family's power dynamics.
How so?
Well, over time, she starts charging $500 for every delivery. For the first time in her adult life, she has independent financial power.
Oh, right. And with that capital comes a sense of internal authority. She goes from being paralyzed by terror to taking charge in life or death situations.
She dives into studying herbalism. She learns to use cramp bark to regulate contractions. She even travels to take a specialized suturing class so she can physically stitch torn tissue herself.
Which is wild because even the previous, more experienced midwife refused to do that.
Hmm.
But you know what the supreme irony of this entire situation is?
The telephone.
Yes, the telephone. The father absolutely loathes public utilities. He wants to be entirely untraceable. But his wife's booming midwifery business requires a phone line so desperate husbands can call her at 3:00 a.m.
So one afternoon, a white utility van just rolls up, and suddenly there's a glossy lime green telephone sitting in their kitchen.
That piece of plastic cracks the door open to the outside world. It gives the mother the logistical tools she needs to battle the state bureaucracy for delayed certificates of birth.
That bureaucratic process is just Kafkaesque. Tara is 9 years old, and she fundamentally does not know what day she was born.
The mother is pacing the kitchen, the coiled cord stretching across the room, arguing with state clerks. She has to explain that her children possess no school records, no medical records, nothing.
The clerks are completely bewildered. The concept of an American existing without a registered birthday is incomprehensible to the system.
Eventually, they just arbitrarily select a day in late September, swear an affidavit, and issue the certificate. Tara writes about how oddly dispossessing it felt to be handed formal proof of her own personhood.
Realizing that proof was even a requirement to exist in the world.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. You'd assume this newfound empowerment, this massive financial independence and medical authority, would translate into the mother establishing a boundary to protect her children.
But it doesn't.
Not at all. Her lucrative money is just funneled directly into funding his extreme preparations for the end of days. She asserts herself in business, but the moment she crosses the threshold into her home, she's tethered to his delusions.
It highlights a deeply tragic compartmentalization. She coexists with the madness rather than challenging it, which perfectly sets up the tragic Arizona trip.
Yeah, this part is agonizing to read. The father falls into a severe, crushing winter depression. He's lying flat on his back on the floor, staring blankly at the ceiling, barely blinking for days.
The mother's desperate to break the cycle, so she insists they pack up and drive south to Arizona to visit the grandparents. She hopes the desert sun will essentially cure him.
Once they arrive, he spends the first 2 days practically catatonic on the porch. But then, a seemingly innocuous trigger occurs. He hears a phone-answering machine message reminding the grandmother of a doctor's appointment.
And he suddenly snaps out of his catatonia and rockets into a terrifying manic state.
Without diagnosing him from afar, the behaviors map perfectly onto clinical signs of rapid cycling bipolar mania. He starts lecturing the grandmother relentlessly.
He calls medical doctors agents of the Illuminati. He paces the house, fueled by this intense passion, lecturing the elderly grandmother into an exhausted stupor for days.
And then at the peak of this manic episode, despite everyone being profoundly exhausted, he abruptly dictates they must pack the car and drive the 12 hours back to Idaho through the dead of night.
Simply because he refuses to miss a single day of work scrapping metal.
And because the mother refuses to challenge his authority, that reckless decision leads directly to a horrific car crash.
They're driving through the pitch-black night. Tyler, the teenage brother, is forced to take the wheel. Exhausted, he falls asleep.
The heavy station wagon drifts off the highway, violently smashes through 2 utility poles, and crashes into a heavy tractor. Tara describes waking up to the vehicle tearing itself apart.
She looks over at Tyler, and his face is completely unrecognizable. His front teeth have been violently smashed backward into the roof of his mouth by the steering wheel.
But the truly chilling detail is what she sees when she looks at the windshield. The ring of cracked glass directly in front of the passenger seat, exactly where her mother was sitting.
A dense spray of cracks radiating outward from a pulverized ring where her mother's head struck the glass. She sustained a massive traumatic head injury.
Within hours, her eyes are completely swollen shut, hidden under massive dark purple bruises they naively nicknamed raccoon eyes.
That specific detail, raccoon eyes, is a textbook clinical sign of a basal skull fracture. Blood is leaking into the tissue around the eyes. It's a life-threatening brain injury.
And this is where their worldview crosses the line from eccentric to fatal. The father absolutely refuses to call an ambulance. He lifts his brain-damaged wife out of the wreckage, gets them back to Idaho, and places her in a dark basement.
For a week, she is left in total darkness. She's disoriented, calling her kids by the wrong names, left to heal a catastrophic brain injury with nothing but darkness and herbal tinctures.
The tragedy of brain trauma is that you don't just sleep it off. Because she receives zero neurological care, her personality and memory retention are permanently altered.
This raises an important question, and it connects back to a story Tara's grandmother shares just days prior to this crash, the legend of the Apache Tears.
Right. The grandmother takes the kids into the desert and hands them these smooth, black obsidian stones. She recounts how a tribe of Apache warriors were trapped by the U.S. cavalry.
Rather than surrender, the warriors mounted their horses and charged right off the edge of the cliff to their deaths.
The legend says that when the Apache women found the broken bodies of their husbands and sons, they cried massive tears that instantly petrified into these black stones.
The grandmother focuses on the tragedy of the men, but Tara's realization is what makes it so haunting.
She realizes the women's fate was decided the exact moment the men spurred their horses forward. The women were trapped by the unyielding, reckless pride of the warriors.
Exactly. Tara draws a direct parallel to the women in her own family. Their physical safety, their futures, they are entirely dictated by the erratic decisions of the father.
Every time he makes a reckless choice, the consequences compress around them, like sediment hardening into stone.
It's a phenomenal metaphor for the inescapable gravity of patriarchal control. But even in solid stone, structural weaknesses exist. A crack eventually forms.
And in this family, that crack is Tyler. Tyler is the older brother who just didn't fit the rhythm of the junkyard. Tara says he was waltzing while the rest of the family was hopping a frantic jig.
He had a noticeable stutter, but he possessed the sheer, unrelenting determination to learn.
He literally walks into a public school, finds a math teacher, and asks to borrow a calculus textbook. The teacher chuckles, saying he can't teach himself calculus from scratch.
But Tyler just takes the book and walks out.
Tyler's eventual escape to college is the seismic shift that fractures Tara's reality. When he leaves behind a cheap boombox and a CD of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir.
We have to analyze what that music represents to a brain that has only known the screaming of metal shears and a paranoid father.
She sits in his empty chair listening to the choir. She realizes that to produce that sound requires a world built on study, discipline, and collaboration.
It provides proof that an alternative system of human organization exists, and that auditory proof acts as a catalyst for her struggle to self-educate.
She begins trying to study mathematics while working in the junkyard. She's literally memorizing equations while dodging the deadly shear machine.
Which is this massive, terrifying hydraulic iron contraption the father uses to brutally chomp through thick steel beams.
She also secretly signs up for dance lessons in town, trying to hide her body in a baggy t-shirt. She finds solace in the synchronized movements.
But the father finds out, calls it a whore's display, and shuts it down, so she pivots entirely to the intellectual.
She buys a used algebra textbook. She happens to have a role in a local community play at the Worm Creek Opera House. And while the play goes on below, she hides in the pitch-black balcony.
Painstakingly figuring out fractions and decimals completely on her own.
Let me ask you this, though. Why doesn't she just walk away? Kyler proved it was physically possible to leave. She sees the danger of the shear machine. She sees her mother's brain damage. Why is leaving so hard?
Because the tether isn't just physical, it's existential. The father has intertwined their physical location with their eternal spiritual salvation.
Ah, so it's like a psychological gravity.
Exactly. For Tara, seeking a secular education means actively choosing man's corrupt knowledge over God's pure truth. She actively believes she will burn in hell if she leaves.
That makes the fact that she actually takes the ACT, scores high enough, and arrives at Brigham Young University all the more staggering.
The culture shock is absolute. It's total alienation from human society. She sits in class and doesn't understand the word syllabus.
When she takes her first exam, she fails because she doesn't know she's supposed to use a pencil to fill in the little Scantron bubbles. She genuinely thinks Europe is a single country.
She lacks the foundational vocabulary of the modern world, which culminates in the art history class we open with.
Seeing the word Holocaust, asking the professor, and the room falling silent, the social contract is broken. Another student glares at her, accusing her of an anti-Semitic joke.
She packs her bag, goes straight to the computer lab, and types the word into the search engine.
And the screen populates with the historical reality. The concentration camps, the mass graves, the emotional weight is crushing.
She writes that she felt this terrifying, furious urge to scream at her own mother. She finally realizes the horrific cost of her parents keeping her ignorant.
They didn't just keep her from algebra. They actively severed her from the shared history of humanity.
That realization is the spark that sets off a massive chain reaction. She enrolls in an American history class with Dr. Kimball and is exposed to the civil rights movement.
She learns about Rosa Parks, Emmett Till, Martin Luther King Jr. She sees photos of police dogs and fire hoses turned on people fighting for basic equality.
And this historical knowledge violently collides with her reality back on the mountain. Her older brother, Sean, has constantly used a horrific racial slur against her.
He uses it casually, cruelly, as a weapon to demean her while they work on dangerous construction sites.
What's fascinating here is the synthesis she performs. Tara realizes that by remaining willfully ignorant, her family was actively lending their voices to a historical discourse of brutalization.
She finally understands who had to be fought for freedom to be won. She sees that Sean's everyday cruelty is participation in a much larger legacy of oppression. But the tragic irony is that while her intellect is expanding, her physical reality back home is descending into an abyss of physical and psychological abuse.
We have to talk about Sean. The violence escalates to a terrifying degree.
There's this scene where they're working 30 feet in the air on the slick steel-roofed purlins of a barn with absolutely no safety harnesses.
Her father yells at her to fetch a chalk line, requiring her to jump across a 15-foot drop. When she freezes, Sean verbally attacks her, mocking her education.
He intentionally uses the physical danger to humiliate her, and the verbal degradation is merely the precursor to physical violence.
He drags her by her hair, shoves her head into toilet bowls, chokes her, but psychologically, the manipulation that follows is even more insidious.
A textbook case of gaslighting. He violently assaults her and mere hours later acts as if it was just a game, or convinces her that she provoked him into restraining her.
He methodically makes her doubt her own memory of the pain,
Which makes her eventual attempt to confront the abuse so devastating. She reaches a breaking point and writes a highly detailed email to her mother, laying out the objective truth.
and miraculously, she gets the exact response she wanted. The mother writes back, "You were my child. I should have protected you."
Tara describes feeling like she lived an entire lifetime in that single moment. She finally felt validated.
But the betrayal that follows is soul-crushing. The mother takes the information to the father, they confront Sean, and Sean completely flips the script.
He threatens them, twists the narrative, and the mother makes a choice. She completely, formally retracts her email.
She denies she ever believed Tara. She sides unequivocally with Sean and the father, telling the family Tara is lying and mentally unstable.
So what does this all mean? Why does a mother throw her abused daughter to the wolves?
It speaks to the rigid hierarchy of the patriarchal survivalist structure. To protect her own precarious place as the wife, she realizes she must sacrifice her daughter's reality.
It means Tara realizes she has to lose her mind to keep her family. If she wants to belong, she has to actively participate in her own gaslighting.
It's an impossible choice, and realizing she cannot survive that lie is the catalyst for her to seek refuge at Cambridge University.
The shift in tone when she arrives at Cambridge is triumphant, but complicated. She begins studying under Professor Steinberg, experiencing a true intellectual awakening.
She learns to read history not as rigid truth, but as a conversation. She reads Burke, Madison, Hamilton, Wollstonecraft.
And then she reads John Stuart Mill. There is a specific quote that permanently shatters her worldview. It is a subject on which nothing final can be known regarding the nature of women.
For a girl who has been told every day exactly what a woman is, a submissive wife, this concept is radically liberating.
It means the mold her father tried to pour her into is a human invention, not a divine mandate.
Yet she still suffers from severe imposter syndrome. She feels like a complete fraud among these ancient stone spires.
Which leads to this incredible moment with Dr. Carey on the roof of King's College Chapel. The wind is howling, and Tara is completely calm near the edge because it's nothing compared to the barn roof.
But she confesses she feels like an imposter, a mere roofer masquerading among scholars.
And Dr. Carey delivers this powerful Pygmalion analogy. He tells her she was just a cockney in a nice dress until she believed in herself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the exact moment Tara understands that true education is not just the accumulation of facts.
It's the construction of an independent self, the belief that you have the right to forge your own identity.
But claiming that right comes with an agonizing cost. We reach the climax of the narrative when Tara is at Harvard and her parents fly across the country to quote-unquote save her from the devil.
The scenes in her dorm room are surreal. The father sits there and shows off his horrifically burned, mangled hands from a gasoline explosion on the mountain.
Because they refused medical treatment, his hands healed into these agonizing claws. But he holds them up as a tender mercy from God.
And the mother chimes in, claiming she can cure cancer with her energy. They demand Tara accept their reality and officially denounce her memories of Sean's abuse.
They give her an absolute ultimatum, and when Tara refuses to be gaslit anymore, they leave.
Shortly after, she receives a final email from her mother. A wife does not go where her husband is not welcome.
The ultimate final severing. The mother permanently cements her loyalty to her marriage, abandoning her daughter.
Years later, Tara returns to Idaho for a brief visit. She sees the massive 40-bedroom mansion her parents built from the essential oil money.
And what is the father doing with that wealth? He's using massive excavators to violently tear up the mountain, desperately searching for an underground water source to stay off the grid.
They're physically destroying the mountain they claim to worship, just to maintain their paranoia.
Which brings us to the profound meaning of the title. Tara looks at the mountain, realizes she cannot go back, and writes that she left the 16-year-old girl in the mirror.
She acknowledges her family might call her severing ties of betrayal or falsity, but she calls it an education.
Because her education was the excruciating process of dismantling the false reality she was raised inside.
And finding the courage to stand in the truth of her own experiences, which is exactly why Educated matters so deeply. It's a masterclass in the power of perspective and defining your own reality.
It is essential reading for anyone struggling to break generational cycles or anyone who takes the privilege of a classroom for granted.
If you love this discussion, please make sure to subscribe to the Book Nook so you never miss an episode of these transformative deep dives.
We have so much more coming.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us which book you'd like us to explore next. We read every single one.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final thought. Tara wrote that she used to believe the first shape a person takes is their only true shape. Think about your own life. What absolute truths from your childhood are you still carrying without questioning? And if you dared to interrogate them, what new shape might you take?
Just imagine being 17, raising your hand in a silent room, and realizing the sky you've been looking at your entire life was just the glass lid of a box someone else built. Thanks for joining us on the Book Nook.